I didn't keep track. So I think
you don't know. You don't have the ability to give an approximation of between 15 and 20, between 30 and 50. You don't know. Or I guess, and you don't need to answer these. I just,
Yeah.
you whatever statement you have.
That number would not be accurate. I just don't feel like I'm capable of giving a number that would be accurate. It would just be a guess. So I would go with the guesses that other people or the accusations of others that experience.
I guess your past statements at past hearings and past assessments of between 15 and 20, that's generally what you've stated. Would that continue to be your statement?
There would probably be more. There would be more than what that statement was.
We are about to watch a Utah parole hearing of a Roach, an LDS Scoutmaster and dance teacher who can't even remember the total number of victims. You might be surprised, or maybe you're not, that he also has a low risk score. We're going to watch the parole hearing and I'll unpack it with all the details at the end.
Okay.
You arrived at the prison in December of 2020. At that time, your commitment offense was aggravated sexual abuse of a child in case 00110084. That was a sentence of 5 years to life in prison. That case has been discussed at previous hearings. There's been lots of discussion in documents about really your history as far as sex offenses, but I'm familiar with those comments. We won't be talking specifically about that case today, but the board certainly will consider it. You had an original hearing in July of 2006. You only had the one case at that time, and your guideline called for 75 months or February 27th of 2007. After that hearing, the board scheduled a June 2012 rehearing. You had that rehearing in 2013. At that time, case 121100763, I believe, was pending, which is now the new case we need to talk about. After that hearing, the board scheduled today's hearing with a sex offender treatment memo and a psychosexual evaluation. The order also included various notes about the pending case that the board may look into the hearing once that was resolved. It also said that you were to submit to a PPG talking about your deviant sexual arousal, submit to polygraph, etc. It also said to address history of manipulating authority and family and to believe in remorse. The recent sex offender treatment document discusses, I believe, the sexual interest side of it. I believe there's discussion of polygraphs as well. So I've looked into those documents, but that's kind of the information I have. In March of 2014, you were convicted in the new case 121100763 of 3 counts of attempted sexual abuse of a child, felony 3, all sentences of 0 to 5 years in prison. That's the current case we need to talk about as far as the original hearing. In September 2021, on a redetermination request, the Board of Pardons made no change to today's hearing. Then in October of 2023, the board recognized an earned time credit because you completed the sex offender treatment program. I believe for the second time that was recognized. As things stand, with the new case included, your guideline I show as 88 months, which passed on March 25th of 2008. Obviously, the board is not bound by the guidelines, and they consider your case as a whole as they make release decisions, and will do so again after today's hearing. The new case is case 121100763. The official version of this case says between 1998 and 2000, which was the time of your arrest for the prior case, you sexually abused a young child while this child was between the age of 4 and 6 years old. I think the official version says this victim was a neighbor of yours. The abuse occurred both at your residence and the victim's residence, per that report. The abuse occurred, quote, on average 3 times a week. It included oral sex, forced oral sex, anal sex, touching the victim's penis, or, quote, masturbating the victim is what the official version states, exposing the victim to pornography, etc. The official version says this abuse generally occurred while the victim was in the bathtub. You told the victim that if the victim told anyone about this abuse, that you would kill his family. When confronted by the police, you denied abusing this victim. I believe you also denied abusing the victims from the 2000 case, which were, the victims were young male family members, I believe between the age of 8 and 12 and also 11. Although you denied that charge, the official version says you told law enforcement that, quote, your pattern of sexual abuse at the time you were molesting boys was consistent with what the victim was accusing you of, it said that you admitted throughout your life there were anywhere from 13 to 25 victims. 13 was the number of children that you molested as an adult, but you denied that that current victim was one of the victims. My first question, did you abuse this victim of this case as described in the official version of the case?
Yes,
Okay. So between the ages of 4 and 6, on average, 3 times a week, it included forced oral sex, anal sex, touching of the victim's penis, exposing the victim to pornography. That's accurate description of what occurred.
yes, sir.
And do you continue to deny sexual abusing the victims from the 2000 case?
I'm sorry, the question again?
The 2000 case, the official version of this new case says that you denied abusing the 2 prior victims. I believe they were a son and a nephew.
Oh, yes,
Did that abuse occur as described in the official version?
yes.
So this occurred. Okay. Thank you for your comments. There's quite a bit of discussion from past hearings, many documents. I think one of the official versions of the cases is upwards of 100 pages. So I appreciate you answering my questions as I provided that summary. My first question, the file discusses you having upwards of 40 to 50 young male victims. I think that it talks about a list that was found by a family member at one point. At past hearings, I believe I've seen that you've stated between 15 and 20 victims. One report that I reviewed said you stated 18 young male victims. Approximately how many victims of sexual abuse did you have during that period of time?
I don't have a number. It's hard to number. When I was operating in such a diluted state of mind, I didn't keep track. So I think
You don't know. You don't have the ability to give an approximation of between 15 and 20, between 30 and 50. You don't know. I guess, and you don't need to answer these. I just,
Yeah.
you whatever statement you have.
My number would not be accurate. I just don't feel like I'm capable of giving a number that would be accurate. It would just be a guess. So I would go with the guesses that other people or the accusations of others that experience.
I guess your past statements at past hearings and past assessments of between 15 and 20, that's generally what you've stated. Would that continue to be your statement?
There would probably be more. There would be more than what that statement was.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering my questions. I just want to, it's my job to present the board with accurate information of what's occurred. So your input today is part of that process. And what did the abuse consist of? Was it generally similar to what was described just barely in the official versions? Was that generally what occurred with the cases?
Of the current case?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one was more progressive than the others. A lot of my assaults didn't go as extensive as that one has described. But either way, I mean, the assaults were still assaults on my victims.
Okay. Thank you for answering those questions. There's, extensive discussion in the official version of cases, etc. So I wanted to get your statements at least today so that I can provide the board with, straightforward information. You've successfully completed the sex offender treatment program twice, I believe in 2007 and now recently in 2023. You've also completed many cognitive life skills classes, some education classes, long list of classes and programming. What insight have you gained from your treatment into your history of sexual abuse?
The best insight that I've gained is how important it is to be aware of my thinking errors, thinking distortions, because in those distortions is how I justified committing my crimes and also justified my denials. Thinking distortions put me in a whole different realm of thinking only of myself and not being able to hear the perspective of others. I was only concerned about my own perspective. So going through the therapy and these classes that I've taken make me realize the seriousness of distorted thinking and how much it affects my perspective.
Okay.
Of course, everything.
Okay. I did receive and review the discharge summary prepared by Dr. Derek Bethea. Did you receive and review a copy of that document?
Yes.
Do you have any questions or concerns about what that document states?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, I've reviewed that pretty thoroughly and provided a summary for the Board of Pardons. It does identify a below average risk of reoffense using the standard assessment tools of the program. Talks about your recent programming. I do want to ask, it notes a recent, so I believe while you were in the relapse prevention portion, it talks about you having a secret sexual relationship with someone that was also in the program. I think that led to a brief removal from the program, but you got back in and successfully completed it. What led to you engaging in this secret relationship with another participant in the program?
As I thought about that a lot since it occurred, since I engaged in that, I realized that I was seeing myself as a victim of my attraction to young boys and young men. Instead of being responsible for that, as a victim, I felt powerless to do anything about it. And so then I gave into it. And that was just when I just started thinking an excuse for engaging in the behavior that I wanted. So bottom line is I wanted to do it. Since that time, I've realized the importance of not seeing myself as the victim, that I have this attraction that I am responsible for it. I'm not a victim of it. And since I took that outlook of it, I've had a lot more self-control and power over it, because not being a victim, I have more options of adequate coping responses to give to it.
Okay. That was my next question. I guess, do you continue to experience sexual attraction to children?
Well, that's hard to say. There's no children in here, but my assumption is that that has not gone away, that there is an attraction. There always has been.
Okay.
It's just been a factor from my early childhood. I was attracted.
Okay. And it talks about some concerns to be addressed through future treatment if you are granted parole and aftercare. Talks about your attitude and participation, things that you talked about and dove into in your treatment. Gives a recommendation. It says, discusses, quote, clear, long history of offending against young boys, as well as avoiding being held accountability for your actions and having recently relapsed related to that relationship we discussed. Talked about you verbalizing responsibility for both of these issues and working on implementing a treatment plan to avoid offending in the future. It recommends that if you're granted parole, that you be paroled to a halfway house and complete the transitional services program. Says you'll need to work closely with APMP, given your history and your sexual deviancy, in supervision and in implementing that success plan if you are granted parole. It says it's recommended that you complete an approved continued care treatment program, receive random polygraphs, have no contact with minors without permission of APMP and your therapist, and avoid employment or other scenarios which would place you in the proximity of minors. Do you agree with those recommendations or have any comments about those?
Yeah, I agree with the recommendations. However, I would like to be considered for paroling home rather than a halfway house. I've got great family support in Cache Valley, which is where I'm from. And I also don't feel like I'd be a burden to them, but I could be a help. My father is going to be 94 in about 9 weeks. Been alone since 2015, and I'd like to be able to give some service back to him, and also my siblings who have supported me throughout my incarceration.
Now that you mentioned that, I've got in my report here your desired plan to live with your father in Logan, talking about family options as well in various parts of the Cache County. Talk about work and your plans with that. Aftercare, I think plans to arrange that if and when you are granted parole. I reviewed letters of support from your siblings, various siblings, church leaders, etc., discussing positive changes, your plans, etc. So I'm familiar with that. I personally think, and I think the board as well, will think that the priority is implementing a success plan and having accountability in that regard. And I think that's a factor that they'll certainly prioritize. But in making those decisions, they will consider all the recommendations that have been made by therapists and also the statements that you've made and submitted in leading up to today's hearing. I do note quickly, you don't have any write-ups since your last hearing. You have 20 different jobs dating back to 2000, really for about 20 years until 2021. Good or excellent ratings in all of these jobs. The housing staff report generally positive as well as of recently. Did you receive a copy of the April 19th, 2024 psychological review that was conducted by Dr. Peck?
Yes, I did.
You did. Do you have any questions or concerns about that document?
No,
Okay, it talks about, I believe, no current or past diagnoses, no current or past mental health medications, no current or past mental health treatment. It gives a present suggested diagnosis of a pedophilic disorder, non-exclusive type, attracted to males, not limited to incestuous relationships. Talks about some risk factors and protective factors as well. It gives the recommendation that you, any future parole include restrictions from future contact with minors, also participation in sex offender aftercare. It states is warranted. It sounds like you agree with those recommendations.
yes.
Okay. Well, those are the specific, let me make sure I've discussed the new information that I wanted to. Those are the questions I have for you. Is there anything else you'd like the board to know as they make a decision in your case?
I'd like to just mention how I feel about the crimes I've committed. I know one of the questions I was asked in therapy is, why did you do it? And why did you do it for so long? And that's a hard question to answer. And the question implies that maybe there should be an answer that satisfies, but there is no satisfactory answer for the behavior that I did and the harm that I've done to so many individuals. So the answer I give to that is because I did not accept responsibility, especially for my attraction to young men, I continued in the destructive behavior, feeling like it wasn't my fault, that was all the distorted thinking. I deeply regret the damage that I've done because my time in prison does not erase the injuries that I've caused to not only my victims directly, but indirectly. And I took from them their innocence. I shattered their world, and I can't give that back. I just deeply regret that I lived my life that way for so long. I know there's a difference between accountability and responsibility. And the system has held me accountable by the incarceration, but responsibility is a personal move. I had to choose to be responsible instead of doing all the distorted thinking to deny that responsibility. And I accept full responsibility now for the effects and the results of my choices and the consequences that have come because of it. But even at that, I can't give back to my victims what I took from them. And I deeply regret that.
Well, I'll note your comments in my report to the board. At this time, I will take your case under advisement. I've put together a report of everything I reviewed prior to today's hearing. I'll include what we've discussed today in that report, and then I'll submit that to the board members in the next few days. As you know, there's 5 members of the board, and they make decisions by a majority vote. Usually that takes between 2 to 4 weeks. Sometimes it's sooner than that, or sometimes it takes a bit later. When a decision is made, it will be sent through the mail to you, and it will also be posted on the Board of Pardons website. So that's how we'll proceed. With that, Mr. Toombs, thank you for being here today and discussing these things with me. I wish you the best of luck moving forward, and we'll go ahead and conclude today's hearing.
All right, thank you.
And they granted parole. He gets out in September of 2025. You cannot make this stuff up. It's, with Utah, this is why we do this. We have this conception we are being manipulated by the state of Utah. You look at their legislation, you look at their laws. He has a life sentence. Well, then you look under the hood, it's 5 years to life sentence. But you would assume he's not getting out. No. He's getting out next year. A man who cannot even count the number of victims is getting out next year. Insult to injury, a low risk score, like a low risk score. Make it make sense. Utah. Why? Why would that roach ever see the light of day again? Ever? In his final statement, he says, because I did not accept responsibility for my attraction to young men. A 4-year-old is not a young man. Mind you, his own biological son, his nephew. He had a list of victims. In what universe is it worth risking one more victim to let him see the light of day? Because he took programs twice? Now he knows how to answer the questions? It even said in the report, watch out, he's very manipulative. It says in the report, has pedophiliac, that's what he is. He has over 50 victims. His victims include his biological son. We know for certain that at least one of them was 4 years old until 6 years old. And you parole him? Madness. Sick. You think you'd expect this from Connecticut. You think you'd expect this from, but not, it's again the manipulation of the states of Utah, where they put these guidelines in legislation where they would say that they gave him a life sentence, but he was eligible for parole after 5 years. And you hear what goes through the process is that they continue to convict him on other charges as the years progressed. He has a recent charge as of 2012, I believe. The initial offense, he was convicted, I think, in 2000, but then they kept bringing on more charges because victims kept coming out of the woodwork. And there's information on this, Richard, and I'll go through it. He has appeals. That one appeal simply was only decided in 2016. It's no surprise, but he was an LDS Scoutmaster. He was teaching clogging lessons on some kind of dance. They were upset because apparently the LDS priests knew about it and didn't say anything. Statute of limitations passed, so they couldn't convict those priests. But I know none of us are surprised about that. But this makes no sense. You want to actually understand how a state really operates, get under the hood. And the best way to do that is these parole hearings. That's my opinion. That's what we've learned, because Illinois, we all had this certain kind of impression. I know I did, of Illinois. Man, they're going to be lenient on crime. They're going to be as woke as it can get. But from what we see from the parole hearings, they are tough. We have seen several hundred of these Utah hearings, and we're waiting to show it to you until after we have the parole board decision. But I'll tell you now, from what we have seen, it's bad. This is not an anomaly. They are releasing inmates over and over and over and over and over. It's worse than Connecticut. Much worse, actually. And then we have Iowa. Iowa might be the worst of all. You'll see some of those hearings. It's in a playlist. If you check it out in the playlist. I just had to get this off. Watching this, I'm so enraged. And thank you, Richard, for providing the info and recording this. Otherwise, we would have been lost in history. We can never find it. No one would know. No one would care. That's why we do this. So this dates all the way back to 1991. LDS Toombs of Benson, Utah, faces 3 counts of aggravated sexual abuse of a child for fondling a 10-year-old boy from 93 to 94. This case did not go to trial because the statute of limitations had expired. The mother, who is not being identified in order to protect the family's identity, said that she spoke to Toombs' misbehavior with the boys from 91 to 90 through 91 through 99. Sorry. 8 years, right? We're not surprised. This guy literally cannot keep track of how many victims he has. With Cooper, 2 LDS bishops and Toombs' family, including his brother, an LDS stake president. I was always told to be patient with Jay. He was a good man. That's what one was told again and again and again. I was even given priesthood blessings that I had been chosen to help him, she says. How sick is that? She knows of the offenses and they're giving her priesthood blessings. The bishops were inclined each time to tell police, the woman says, but later told her they had checked with church officials and learned they did not have to report Toombs as long as he was repentant and getting professional help. There you have it. I mean, clearly, we know this, right? This is nothing new. This is nothing new that the church coddles and, this is nothing new. But reading it and seeing it is different. This is getting close to it. But everyone can't keep failing children. The state, the parole board, this has to be the final line. And this is the kind of story that we do because hopefully someone will see this. Someone will make a press release. A news station will cover it. People will become enraged as we all are all now, and things will change. Because there is no way that the public understands what is happening in their cities, in their states, from the people who they vote into office. Because anyone with common sense who is not sick, who is not wired like a roach, would be disgusted by this. Toombs allegedly sexually abused at least 11 children between 70s and his arrest in 2000. He was an LDS Scoutmaster, and he taught clogging. I don't know. Here's another one. There's a bunch of articles. I don't know if we really need to go through all of this insanity. Let's see what the detective says. This is from an insert of a newspaper, a printed newspaper, So Richard found this in the archives. Salt Lake Tribune Logan, a 43-year-old Benson man accused of fondling a boy 3 times in the early 90s, now faces another charge of growing evidence that the victims have been many, and the obstacles few. Logan police detective Rod Peterson says that since 3 felony charges were filed in February against Jay, the detective has received more than a dozen telephone calls from parents and alleged victims dating back more than 20 years. So as you can see, they were all keeping this a secret because they were afraid of the LDS church. They were afraid of the community. They were shunned into keeping quiet. And can you even think about the concept of that everyone is being kept quiet so that he can continue to offend and harm children? For what purpose? And he gets out. And they don't even have victim impact statements, as you can still see the control. This is, don't get me going. We don't get cases of this magnitude very often, Peterson says. Yet Peterson and Cache County prosecutor Scott Wyatt says that one of the most disturbing facts of all of this is that many people knew of the alleged child abuse and not tell police. Logan, to Cache County seat, may be home to Utah State University, but it remains a farming and business community isolated from Utah's urban areas by a mountain range and is populated deeply rooted families who put a premium on loyalty, friendship, and forgiveness. Sorry. You all need to beg for forgiveness from your children, because that is a monster that is wired as a monster. But you all are not monsters. You're the ones that need to be begging for forgiveness. They're going to allow him right back into their little secluded homes. And who do you think he's going to have access to? You have to be an idiot to think not. You know what's crazy? While he's in his program for sexual deviancy, whatever, he has a relationship. This is recent. You know, in Louisiana, even these would be straight up reasons you're done. You're not getting paroled. You have that kind of write-up. And here it was like nothing happened. It was like they asked him, why? What did you learn from the situation? And he goes down a classic like manipulation road path. What's it called? Gaslighting. His answer, listen to it again, is just like he goes in like a 5-sentence tangent, which meant nothing. Oh, he goes on to say, I discovered from that experience that I am not the victim. What? This is his answer to why he's having sex with someone in the sex program. I am not the victim. No, you're not the victim. You're literally Satan. I'm not speechless because I'm just done. You know, we've seen so much, thousands of cases. And this one is just shocking. He is a serial predator, a monster, someone who should have been given, frankly, the death penalty. And he's going to be walking next year free with his family. You know what that means. I mean, how many nephews and nieces and grandkids and all that stuff that's going to be around him. You talk about hundreds of kids. Such values are at play at the Toombs case, which pits a prominent family and its supporters against law enforcement. J. Toombs accusers who say it's time he is punished. Toombs, who moved to neighboring Benson last year, was charged in February with 3 counts. Those charges stem from allegations that Toombs found 3 years, 7 from 3 years from the time the boy was 7 until his parents found out when he was 11. This is 1994. This month, Toombs was charged an additional count for a child in 1989. It just goes on and on and on. What's it say? He expressed to people that he found out in a very convincing way that he was truly sorry for what he'd done, and it wouldn't happen again, says Peterson. They've forgiven him. They believe him. He's repented. Forgiveness is fine, says Wyatt, but it doesn't stop an abuser. Thank you, detective. Pedophiles repeat that much we know. Wyatt was so agitated upon learning there was widespread knowledge. That's it, because it's a newspaper, remember? So now we're done with that one. There's another article. This one I also ran in 2000. See, here it is. The judge sentenced him from 5 years to life. The sentence of 5 years to life was the minimum mandatory sentence. Minimum mandatory. You see that I don't know why it would even be 5 to life. Why wasn't it not just life? This is accused of 11. This case attracted statewide attention when prosecutors threatened to charge 3 Latter-day Saint bishops who repeatedly knew of it but did not report it to police. But they could not prosecute the bishops because the limitations had expired. That's a law that needs to change, doesn't it? And here's his appeal. It's just, this is the one where he was accused of doing it to the neighbor's son. The one that he said, if you tell anyone, I'm going to kill your family. And it goes on and on and on and on. I'll put the links in the description. I don't think there's any real reason to read any more of it. But look what he says. In sum, although 4 years statute limitations, he's appealing because the statute of limitations. That's how much remorse he has. Remember, this was just settled a few years ago. In effect, the Toombs committed the charged offense. The 4-year limitation period was not triggered in 2000 and did not expire before the limitation period. Definitely, neighbor statement, communication, or suspicion that a crime may have occurred, but they did not articulate sufficient detail to permit law enforcement agencies to conclude it was done. Finally, because he failed to demonstrate that his counsel performed it deficiently, Toombs cannot demonstrate that his trial counsel provided constituent effect to the counsel. They didn't dismiss. That much they didn't do. Well, there you have it. There you have it. A state that you think, I lived in Utah for a year. I loved it. I lived in Park City. Man, I would have stayed. I loved it. And you really don't get the impression that this is how they handle things. You just don't. But as you can clearly see, Utah is broken. Maybe more broken than many of our other states. We're going to watch one more out of the state of Utah, and the survivor comes up and leaves, I think, one of the most profound and epic statements that we have heard in over 3,000 parole hearings. Let's jump in and I'll unpack it at the end.
Your commitment offenses are 2 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, felony 2, and 2 counts of forcible sex abuse, felony 2. The facts of those cases have been discussed in depth at previous hearings. I've reviewed summaries and all the documents of comments made by all interested parties at those hearings, also in various documents, really quite a few documents that we have in the file. I'm familiar with those. The board will consider those as they're making a decision, but the primary purpose of today's hearing is not to dive into those facts, just so that everyone's aware of that. So the primary purpose of today's hearing is to discuss what's occurred since the most recent hearing, the 2018 rescission hearing, primarily the sex offender treatment program document that we received recently. You're serving a maximum sentence of between 3 and 50 years in prison. There is a 1 to 20 and 1 to 15 consecutive to each other and consecutive to 2 1 to 15-year sentences. Per Utah statute, I do note the maximum time served on these consecutive sentences is 30 years. Based on that statute, the expiration date in this case would be May 7th of 2039. Your guideline calls for 76 months incarceration. That guideline passed on September 6th of 2015. Obviously, the board is not bound by that guideline, and in making release decisions considers all relevant factors, including the nature of your offenses, your criminal history and community supervision, supervision history, victim impact and input, your rehabilitative progress, institutional behavior, etc. You had an original hearing in September of 2011. After that hearing, the board scheduled a 2016 rehearing. After that 2016 rehearing, the board granted a parole of May 7, 2019. At that time, you had successfully completed the sex offender treatment program, and in addition to the treatment program that you completed while on probation prior to prison. In September of 2017, the Department of Corrections reported to the Board of Pardons that you had written extensive child sex abuse material. These things have been detailed in detail at previous hearings as well, and I'm familiar with the substance of that. That incident led to a rescission hearing in July of 2018. After that hearing, the board rescinded the parole date and scheduled today's hearing with the sex offender treatment memo. In May of 2022, the Board of Pardons denied a redetermination request. It considered an institutional progress report at that time and made no change to today's hearing. And in April of this year, the board recognized and earned time credit because you completed, again, the sex offender treatment program. So that leads us to today. At this time, we'll do the victim testimony. I do note I've reviewed past written submissions, summaries of testimonies from past hearings, and the documents that I've received leading up to today's hearing, but certainly want to hear any input that you have today, and thank you for being here. If you just step up to the microphone, and I'll swear you in. If you'd raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you provide today will be truthful and accurate?
I do.
Thank you. And you may proceed when you're ready.
My name is Emily, and formerly Emily Maness. I am the victim in this case, and I'm here to speak about the sexual abuse that took place at the hands of my father for the first 15 years of my life. When Travis was convicted, he pled guilty to 2 counts each of forceful sexual abuse and sexual exploitation of a minor. This does not even begin to skim the surface of what took place during those formative years of my life, nor does it paint an accurate picture of my life once he was sentenced. In 2009, just prior to turning 15 years of age, while driving down a road on a family vacation, something in my brain clicked. It was normal for my dad to get angry and yell, but this time was different. It hadn't quite been a year since he was reintegrated back into our home after spending time in jail on charges of child porn possession. I'm not sure what prompted this confession miles away from home. What I am sure of is just how difficult it was for me to speak. My father made me promise that if I were to ever speak of the events that occurred, that I would let him be the one to confess to my family. I held up my end. I kept repeating the same words. You have something to tell mom. You have something to tell mom. Again, you have something to tell mom. But of course, he wasn't actually going to speak of his actions. He wasn't going to admit guilt. There's a parking lot I have yet to visit since that day where I sat on the grass and cried harder than I ever have, trying to speak of events I had been threatened to keep a secret my entire life. My father did not confess to his actions when sentenced, instead waiting to see what words his traumatized daughter could muster out. At each hearing, it seems he acknowledges more of his actions, knowing exactly how to work this system, knowing he cannot be convicted for the same crime twice. That at this time in his sentence, he just needs good behavior and active participation. Sit nice, nod, admit the next incident that I as the victim can finally put into words, no more, no less. Once back home, the first thing my mother did was take his wallet, and yet somehow after being taken to the hospital by ambulance, he was able to take $10,000 out of their bank account prior to being booked into prison, yet after he attempted suicide in our home. I was told after the attempted suicide in our bathtub that the police took him to the hospital where he got treated and taken into custody. Years later, I was informed that the above statement was incorrect, that he was out in public for a few days prior to being arrested, as he was still on parole at the time, and his parole officer was involved in arresting him. While I was not aware of this, I was being protected, so I felt safe. However, this backfired. I was sure there was a family member or a friend on the outside that helped him acquire the money. My immediate thoughts once I heard of the money being taken out were to the times he would look at me and say, "If you ever decide to tell anyone, let me know so I can come from me." My mind raced with scenarios. Was there a plan to get rid of me? I knew there was a knife in his bedside table. My 15-year-old mind played out countless scenarios of what could have happened if I told him privately that I wanted out. Then my mind tried to figure out how he had acquired the money. He didn't even make the money. He was the stay-at-home dad while my mother worked long shifts at the hospital. This led me to thinking there was someone in public, not locked up, helping him. I was terrified, my brain unable to process the atrocities that occurred, let alone speak of them, especially not if that meant I was in danger despite him being locked away. I managed to sit down, read a paper with options, and circle a few answers. This was all the courage I could muster up at the time. This is how he was charged, a few circles on a piece of paper. These circles would impact the rest of my life. To this day, I have no idea how I would have done anything differently, as I was so emotionally damaged, but I do know that one of my biggest regrets is not being able to speak up and use my voice at the time. He took full advantage of the opportunity to be charged for much less than his actions warranted. It was not just the 15 years of my life that he took from me, it was the first 15. It wasn't just the first 15, it was the 16th and the 17th and the 18th and so on when I was too depressed to even get out of bed. Too scared to go to school after they showed his picture on the news because what if someone saw and judged me? Those 15 should have been filled with love, with support, learning, and developing, shaping me into an adult, into the next generation of people who will change and lead the future. Instead, what I learned was how to keep my mouth shut, how to lie and act normal. I learned how to compartmentalize boxes in my brain and shove them high on a shelf as far back into the darkness as they could go. I learned how to disassociate, how to disconnect from reality, how to pretend the unwanted things physically happening to my body weren't actuality. I learned unhealthy coping mechanisms. I learned how to be a people pleaser. I learned how to avoid conflict. And now I am unlearning those 15 years and relearning how to set boundaries, how to say no, how to unclench my fists, how to speak truths and not run from reality. In 2003, Travis was investigated for downloading child porn on his personal computer, which was confiscated. Then again in 2004, the FBI once again noticed these downloads. This computer was also confiscated in 2005. And in 2006, he was charged for 10 pictures, allowed only pleading guilty to 2. 2 pictures out of hundreds. It seemed he felt that showing me all these photos would somehow show me that this abuse was okay, normal even, that I wasn't alone in this world of secrets. After effectively lying to the FBI and stating that he had never touched me, I remember wondering if any of the confiscated pictures were the ones taken of me. He made me cover my face with a pillow while lying on his bed, legs spread wide. Another on the exercise ball. People pay money for pictures like this. For years, I would sit awake at night wondering how many other predators saw those photos. How many other young girls were also in the basement of their family home, their father showing them pictures of a young girl their age, being convinced that this was in fact acceptable behavior. At a hearing in 2011, Travis tells the board his obsession with pornography started at 7 years old when his father introduced him to it. This addiction he has started long before I was even born. I merely became a convenience when looking wasn't adequate enough. A quote from Lao Tzu reads, "Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny." Next, Travis notes, instead of turning to heroin or methamphetamine or cocaine, I went to something that I knew I could derive pleasure from, looking at pornography. And then, of course, it was, I'm getting away with something that I shouldn't be getting away with. And that's what started the journey towards the more illegal aspect of it. It began simply as the rush of something that I could get away with that I wasn't supposed to, end quote. This quote is directly from Travis in front of the board and speaks volumes of the way his brain is conditioned and functions in the real world, where daily temptation is present. Where something enticing is not simply a slice of cake that may make you gain weight. It is viewing a child as a toy with real life consequences affecting someone else's ability to live their life. In the same hearing, my father admits that after being released from jail and reintegrating back into the family home, it took merely a month for the abuse to continue, admitting this time it was more involved. He admits to asking if I would engage in oral sex, to which I said no. He admits to propositioning me with money, but does not divulge the fact that despite me saying no, oral sex became routine. Suckers and lollipops were used to entice me and change my mind. However, it wasn't the taste that bothered me, it was the entirety of the act itself. My earliest memories are just such incidents. Family vacations in our pop-top van are filled with these memories. Walking up the stairs with someone behind me leads to them. Keeping the shower closed leads to them. Seeing a door frame that is missing its trim leads to them. I may be able to hug someone Monday, yet be unable to on Tuesday. I am paying for medication, for therapists, for doctors. Sleep is a joke. I used to lay awake at night in my twin bed waiting, knowing Dad would come to say goodnight, knowing he would come to check on me, knowing he would wake me up for school, all with a sick twist. Now I lay awake while my mind goes a million miles a minute trying to process every detail of my life. I catch myself with my eyes not fully closed in a state of mind between being alert and trying to rest. I finally fall asleep, but that does not mean my mind is healing. I dream he is following me. I dream that my father is out of prison and coming up the driveway in the dark. I frantically call 911, but this is a dream. 911 is busy. I get pulled on hold. I'm running barefoot through the neighborhood screaming, but no sound is coming out. When I was 4 years old, my father spoke to authorities of the church and claimed to have healed, claimed there was no more pornography, claimed the abuse stopped. It took me another 10 years to speak up again. He had a beautiful family, love, and support for years after this came to light. Multiple tried and failed attempts to stop viewing porn and stop abusing his daughter, yet never did they stick. Never did the abuse stop until he was incarcerated. His track record speaks for itself, not only prior to being convicted, but also while locked up. Action plans and multiple treatment plans have been completed and recompleted, and yet in 2018, Travis was found in possession of 50 pages of written sexual abuse scenarios of children. Treatment was completed prior to this, during this, and after this. During the hearing that year, the judge refused to even speak regarding what was found in these pages, as they were so graphic and disturbing. In 2011, near the end of the hearing, Travis tries to thank the board for letting me speak, to which the board replies, "Let me say, don't you try to manipulate me, okay?" In 2016, Travis tells the judge he wants to be open and honest in order to try and have a future relationship with me. Yet, as previously mentioned, in 2018, he's found to possess 50 pages of written sexual abuse scenarios. He knows how to play the game. He is smart about his actions and the outcomes from his decisions. He is precise in choosing his words, passing lie detection tests without a sweat. To you and me, the shower goes in the bathroom. The Sonic game on PlayStation goes in the downstairs living room. But to me, those are also all flashbacks with memories tied directly to them. She has trouble washing her hair. I'll help her in the shower. I need to erase these photos so I'm not caught. I'll print them out on photo paper and lay them around the basement to dry. Maybe if she plays Sonic while she's laying on top of me, she'll be easier to manipulate. The abuse doesn't belong in one place in my brain. It is scattered throughout, stuck in memories, stored in corners, waiting to pop back into view at any given time. It was unexpected when and where the abuse would happen. I was forced as a little girl to live a double life, to pretend everything was okay, to push it all into the back of my mind, ignore it while trying to be like every other little girl running around the playground. Except I wasn't. While in elementary, my father was a room mom helping out the classroom. After school, he would tell me which children in my class he wanted to do inappropriate things with. I made it a point not to be close friends with my classmates, as I knew I would not be able to explain why I couldn't invite them over for play dates. I would never be the little girl running around the playground at school with her best friend because I didn't have one. The older I get, the more clear it becomes that I don't have a full or complete understanding of the effect this abuse has and will continue to have on my life. The damage is done. It cannot be undone. I am learning and growing every day. I've accepted the pain that this is my life, that I have to work harder than others just to maintain some sort of normalcy. I've accepted that my romantic relationships will always have challenges, both physically and mentally. But I refuse to remain quiet. I refuse to sit down. I refuse to sugarcoat the abuse I suffered at the hands of my father. Today, I vow to do everything in my power to prevent another soul from being traumatized. I am no longer the girl sitting at that long wooden table, pen trembling in my hand, struggling to circle words. I stand here today, every bone in my body ready to fight and prevent this sort of behavior from repeating. As for my father, you have been convicted of forcibly violating me with malicious intent. You made these choices and therefore received these consequences. I'm fighting hard, not only for me, but for my future children, my grandchildren, and any other child you feast your eyes upon. I'm fighting for the little girl whose innocence was taken from day one. In life, we take preventative measures, so why not here? Why not now?
Do you have more to, okay. Well, thank you for your statement. I'll go back and listen to that tomorrow. I've taken notes. I'll make sure that the things that you've said are made aware to the board members as they're making a decision after today's hearing.
Thank you.
Mr. Maness, briefly, would you like to respond briefly to that statement?
I would only like to say that there is no response for that. There's no excuse for what I've done. No, sir. But I can't argue any of that.
Okay. Well, I'll note your comments as well. I do want to note, I think in the last Board of Pardons decision, there was a restitution order made per documentation submitted, and I think that will probably be revisited. We won't be going into it today. We only have 20 minutes. We're about out of time now, but that probably will be something that will be happening in the future. Just wanted to mention that. Okay, the primary purpose of today's hearing is to discuss the April 15th, 2024 Sex Offender Treatment Program discharge summary. Did you receive and review that document?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have a lengthy summary of it. I won't go over every detail of it. You know, it identifies an above average risk of reoffense using the static 99R, the assessment tools that the Sex Offender Treatment Program uses. It gives a pretty thorough discussion of the 2018 psychological evaluation by Dr. Gamboa. It discusses, you know, your treatment episode, etc. Recently that's gone on. It talks about risk factors that you identified, your attitude during treatment, etc. It talks about concerns to be addressed in the future, including you maintaining your motivation to address your history of living a double life, managing your attraction to young girls, trust the therapeutic process, maintain appropriate boundaries with others with sexual desires, and discontinue manipulating others to achieve your desires. It gives recommendations. It notes specifically that if you're granted parole, you'll be released to a halfway house to complete transitional service program. Close supervision by adult probation and parole, given your long history of offending, primary attraction to young women, and having the ability to live a double life. Recommends that you complete an approved continued care treatment program if you're granted parole, receive random polygraphs, have no contact with minors without permission from APNP and a therapist, avoid employment or any situation that would put you in proximity of minors. Certainly the board will consider those recommendations and all input and everything that's gone into this case and making a decision. But do you agree with the recommendations made and opinions given in that document?
Yes, I do, 100%, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Transition services, I've inquired, and my understanding of transition services program is they help you to find an address, a place to live, therapy to get lined up and things like that. It should be in the packet there that you have. There is an acceptance letter from a place that will offer an aftercare continued.
Addiction and psychology services, is that where you're wanting to do treatment? Is that correct?
Yeah, if granted parole, then yes, sir.
Okay, and I think while we're on your release plan, I think you said in your board packet you'd like to eventually transition or live with your aunt in Sandy. I've read your comments about that individual working on securing full-time employment, talking about some opportunities that I think you mentioned a BD medical as far as where to work. And you talk about, I reviewed a letter of support from your brother as well. It talks about some of those things as well. Anything else you'd like to add as far as your release plan for if you are granted parole?
Yeah, I really would like to specify advanced psychological services, even if the board does.
Advanced, or is it addiction and psychological services? I think that's what I read.
Might be it, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I apologize for not getting.
That's okay. No, I just that's okay.
Yeah, if the board sees fit, even to offer an intensive outpatient program, you know, from scratch, again, they do offer that. They offer any level that the board sees fit if I am granted that privilege.
Okay.
And the address for Nancy actually has been approved in the past. It's where I stayed temporarily while on the original probation.
Oh,
so we're hoping that all those things could be, of course, taken into account. If if that's all the therapist recommended, transition, for the halfway house, but if,
And I'll note that. You mentioned at the start of this hearing, you wanted to talk details of programs, I think, and treatment that you've done. I'm looking at a list of programs that you've done. I mean, if a program or class is available, it looks like you've done it. You've done
Yes.
SOTP now for the second time in prison. You did it also on probation. Obviously, after both episodes of sex offense treatment, you continued with very concerning behavior. Obviously, the abuse that was hidden during that first episode and then continued.
Yeah.
Secrecy, manipulation of supervisors and therapists, obviously the child sex abuse material in 2017, which is very concerning. So I'm not going to go through every detail of those classes. I think we have an updated version of that, but I will, at the end of the hearing, if you really want to go through those details, you can. My question is, what's new this time? What new is new in this last completion of sex offender treatment? What's new, and what input do you have as far as insight you've gained for the board as they make a decision in your case?
what's new this time is a lot. We, at the program here at this county jail, it is a different program than what I participated in previously. We have the opportunity to meet individually with the therapist if we so chose to do so. That's above and beyond just the group meetings that we had. And I think for me, that made all of the difference. There was the opportunity to get a lot more personalized help. I truly felt that the therapist here, Mr. Buffet, was able to not only understand what my thinking was at the time, but he was able to help me uncover a lot of things. As much as I would like to sit here and say I haven't told a lie the whole time I've been incarcerated, he was able to help me realize I wasn't being honest with myself that whole time. And if I couldn't be honest with myself, I couldn't be honest with anyone else. A lot of the things that I have learned above and so many things. The most important thing that I've learned is how to ask for help when I need it. I've been able to really accept the true depth of my deviancy. I've been able to accept that it's part of me, that I allowed it to become such an ingrained part of me. And as much as I would like to think that with consistent, appropriate interventions, all those thoughts will eventually disappear over time, but they won't. And Mr. Buffet has been very helpful in helping me to recognize that if and when the thought does come, appropriate interventions to manage it there and then, so it doesn't go any further. Risk factors, risky situations, appropriate interventions, but that's been only a small portion of what I've learned. Every time that we have a hearing, every new impact statement that is submitted, I learn more and more of how Emily and the rest of my family has been affected. And one of the big things that I've had to accept is it's going to take a long time to earn people's trust. There are some that may never want to trust me again, and that would be a perfectly justified thing. And that's going to be rough. But along with that, people aren't going to believe what I say a lot of times. And as much as anything that I do say, it's people are right to believe that I may be trying to manipulate. Even when that may not be the case, I have to live with those consequences. I brought this on myself. As much as I want to say to Emily, I'm sorry, she said.
Yeah, don't make any direct comments to the victims, please. Just direct your comments to me. But
yes, sir.
And maybe I'll note your comments about the treatment. You've answered the questions. I think I have a very thorough understanding of the case and the file. We're well over time now. Maybe another minute if you'd like to sum up and make final comments.
Okay, thank you. I prepared something, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I can't presume to ask for or ever be, excuse me for a moment. One of the big things I've been working on in therapy is how to overcome the shame and how to ask for help. So I can't ever presume to ask for or be granted forgiveness for what I've done in the past. I hope to be given the opportunity to prove that I have truly changed and that I can be a productive member of society once again. I have no desire to cause anyone any further pain. For the first time in a very long time, I actually feel good about myself. I'm confident about my ability to successfully manage any deviant thoughts or urges that may come in the future. I'm no longer afraid to ask for help when I need it. For these reasons and many others, I no longer fear the future as I once did. I know that I can and will succeed in never offending again when granted the privilege of parole. As much as I know my daughter, as much as I want to say that I'm sorry, I know that she doesn't want to hear it. She doesn't want to hear me say I'm sorry. She wants to be shown by my actions that I'm sorry. That is something that she said to me one day, and I have not lived up to that, but I fully intend to. I just hope that I can do this, given the opportunity to parole, given that privilege. I know I can succeed. I know I can show everybody by my actions that I
Okay.
truly.
And thank you. Maybe 5 more seconds. We're out of time here now, but if you'd like to finish quickly. And I have that written. I have that word for word in my report.
Yes,
at this point,
that is-
so the
that is-
Spartans will be aware of it. Anything else quickly? I didn't want to cut you off, but we're well over time. So a couple more seconds to finish up.
No, thank you, sir. for
Okay,
this opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you for your comments, everyone who's made those at today's hearing. What I'll do from here is take the case under advisement. I've put together a report of everything I reviewed prior to today's hearing. I'll include what has been discussed at today's hearing into that report, and then I'll submit it to the Board of Pardons members in the next few days. Generally, it takes between 2 to 4 weeks for a decision to be made. Once the decision is made, it will be sent in writing to you, Mr. Maness, and it will also be posted on the Board of Pardons website for anyone in the community that would like to access it there. So with that, thank you all for participating, and we'll go ahead and conclude today's hearing.
Thank you.
And you probably won't believe this because I know I couldn't. They granted parole. They granted parole effective this November, 5 months from today of this recording. They granted parole. They granted parole 35 years early. You can't make it up. How is it possible? Make it make sense. Make it make sense. We all saw the same thing. We all see his record. We all know what he did. You know, he was granted, mind you, right, in 2016. He was supposed to get out, but they found a 50-page novel. A 50-page novel, and they rescinded him. You know, and the parole board members cut him off at the end because he didn't want to get manipulated either. I thought there's no way they're granting. How can you? How dare you? And this was the shock that Richard and I saw when we went to Utah. We had this assumption, and I lived in Utah. I lived there for a year in Park City. I would never believe that this could be the system. They give long sentences. 2059 is his full term date, but they parole like it's going out of style. There's one caveat to his parole approval, just one, and it doesn't go to credit, in my opinion, to Utah. Maybe you can give them credit for writing the law into legislation. But in my opinion, it goes to credit to Emily, the survivor, who gave a mic drop of epic proportions. He has an obligation to meet before he gets paroled in November. And he has to pay restitution of $5,275.71 to Emily. Now, this restitution wasn't, he initially had paid whatever restitution the court ordered, but Emily had come in and said, wait a minute, I had to take X amount of therapy over Y amount of years. Here's the bill, here's the receipts. And Utah does require him to make those payments. Now, sadly, we know that he has support from his brother. We know that he has support from another relative. I can't recall who's going to live with. And $5,275 is not out of reach. So I don't know how really optimistic we can feel about that being a blocker here. But Richard was very important to point out, and we're going to share this in all the notes. They don't give the results in these hearings, but we're not going to share it with you until we have the results. And there's a lot of fine print when they grant parole, like this particular one. This wasn't his only offense. He has many. Richard showed it's a small appeal. I'm not going to screen share with you because it's just a tiny amount. But it was he filed an appeal in 2000. No, it was basically he was caught. He was somehow he became a massage therapist, if you can imagine, and a bunch of women said that he was touching them inappropriately, and he was found guilty and convicted of that. That's just one of his small little crimes he was caught for. What was it? I don't know. The appeal was decided on December 23rd, 2010. I'm not sure when he filed it, when he was caught. But can you imagine the survivor comes up? Of course, there's no DA because, who cares? And she leaves just like, really, I don't think anything could have been more magnificently written, more perfectly written. And he had the audacity to even say, I'm going to show her with my actions because that's what she one time said. Shut up. I want to share a quote of her writing. She said, I'm fighting for my children. I'm fighting for my future grandchildren. I'm fighting for the little girl whose innocence was taken day one in life. Then she goes on to say, we take preventative measures. Why not here? Why not now? And it's such a simple request. Make sure he doesn't harm another child. And the state of Utah in their wisdom is deciding that it is worth taking a risk for this cockroach. Make it make sense. But this, if you all want to know, this is why we do this. This is it. This is the answer. This is it right here. If we hadn't recorded this, and Richard actually recorded this because I was unable to, I was traveling, this would have been lost in time. That speech would have been lost in the archives. No one would know it existed. But now the world will know. The world will hear Emily's mic drop. The world will see the injustices. And this is the only thing that might cause change, because there is no way that the constituency in Utah understands that the politicians that they vote into power are the ones that are allowing this type of insanity. There's no way. It's not going to happen anymore where people don't know about this stuff. The world is going to know. We are all going to hear Emily's battle cry. And with that, I'll let you go.